Welcome to the Success Ascent. My name is Pat Mancuso. I'm the creator and host of our show, and we're excited that you're here today. On this episode, we interview Paul Slack from Vende Social. Now, Paul has a very long and extensive track record in social media, online marketing, digital marketing. He's also a serial entrepreneur and author of Social Rules. Today on our show, Paul shares some amazing strategies on how to maximize your digital platform. So on to the ascent. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Success Ascent. My name is Pat Mancuso. I'm the creator and host of our show, and I am so excited you're with us today. I have a gentleman who I know is going to share some amazing tips and strategies on social media, on growing a business, and all the things that he's experienced as part of the multiple businesses that he's grown. I'm going to do the intro, I'm going to read it, and then I'm going to kick it off, and he'll tell us more really who he is. So I'd like to welcome Paul Slack. So first, let's understand Paul's a serial entrepreneur, just like many of you in our audience are. That's why we created the Success Ascent. He's got more than 20 years in the digital marketing experience world. He's the founder and CEO of Vende Social Digital and the author of 2 books, Social Rules and Social Selling Rules. And I know we're going to get into that topic about how to get and create more leads online, which every business owner needs to have. Paul's also a sought-after speaker in the digital marketing space. He's been featured in Success Magazine, Fox Radio, big stage events, and has trained thousands of people and business leaders across the country on the best ways to leverage digital marketing. He also leads a marketing team of pros who work with busy executive owners who understand digital marketing is critical, but don't have the time or expertise to focus on it and build it in a way that delivers results, real results. So Paul, welcome to the show.
Hey, Pat, thanks for having me. Really excited to be here today.
Well, and I'm excited to have you. So all that stuff was amazing. So tell us who the real Paul is. I know you operate out of Dallas, correct?
I do. Not real sunny and warm right now, but definitely like the warm weather of Dallas. And I know you're up in the Minneapolis area, and so you can make fun of me in the summertime, and I can make fun of your weather in the wintertime. How about that?
There you go. People do all the time. I love it.
Yeah. So Pat, my history kind of goes all the way back. I'm going to date myself here to the 90s. I got started as a sales rep in the technology industry right around 1990. And, you'd be amazed back then. One of the first things that I was selling was hard drives or disk drives that attached to mainframe computers. And so, for what we could go to the store today and buy like a multi-gigabyte little USB stick, for $10, I was selling those things for $100,000 back in the 90s. And so definitely kind of a B2B background. But one of the great things about learning how to sell in the 90s in technology, that was some of the best sales education that was around back then. And so I really cut my teeth there. And moving on into the late 90s, this thing called the internet happened. And, it really kind of changed the world. And about 96, 97, I think it was, this internet startup reached out to me and said, hey, we need some help running the central part of our region. And it was a software company that was going to be connected and helping people with e-commerce and things like that. And so I went ahead and jumped out of my lucrative technology sales job and jumped into this internet boom, which quickly became the internet bubble, which quickly kind of burst, in about 2000. And what's interesting, Pat, about that is, it's so amazing how these different moves that you make in your career really kind of define you, because I was a technology guy. I really didn't know that much about the internet. Learned it quickly when I went to work for that e-commerce company. And we were doing a big project for BMC Software down in Houston, not too far south here in Texas. Mm-hmm. And we were getting ready to launch their store, their e-commerce store. And I was in a meeting, this was like 99. And somebody in the meeting said, hey, what are you going to do to make this store rank in the search engines? And I said, search engine, what do you mean? And he says, oh, you can optimize our website so that when somebody goes to Yahoo, because that was like the biggest search engine back then, we'll show up. And so I'd never heard of that, Pat. And that just fascinated me, that there was a way that we could help businesses rank high in search engines. And so I became very interested in that, a quick study in that. And then of course in 2000, the internet bubble burst, and necessity is the mother of invention. And I found myself realizing that my stock options weren't worth a whole lot anymore. And I needed to figure out what I was going to do with the rest of my life. And as I looked at just the internet and what was going on, I really felt like, and you have to go back to 2000 to kind of get your head around this, but the B2B world really wasn't, they weren't, adopting the internet as fast as maybe the B2C world.
Right.
And I had this B2B sales training. And so I had this great idea. Why don't I go and start a B2B digital agency that helps B2B businesses kind of leverage the internet to really grow their businesses? Because I saw that that was going to be a really big deal.
Right.
And, the B2Cs had kind of figured it out. The B2Bs hadn't. I also kind of felt like the world was so very transactional focused back then. My background was e-commerce. And so everybody was all about putting something in a shopping cart, taking your credit card online and checking out. But nobody was really thinking about, well, how do you get somebody to your website that you really care about, that targeted customer? How do you message to them in a way that's going to make them want to do something on your website? And so I wanted to go into the B2B market because I knew I could serve that market well. But I also wanted to focus on not just ranking high in the search engines, which was about the only thing you could do back then, but also just how do you get the right buyer? How do you get them to do what you want? And that's really how my first agency got started back in 2000.
I love it. I love it. So how did Vende Social come along?
Well, so in 2010, I was approached by another company. They were a video production company and were wanting to get into managed services, specifically because back in 2010, YouTube was becoming a big deal. They had been in video production for a while, but all their clients were saying, hey, thanks for making this amazing video. What are you going to do to get me some traffic or views to my video? And they had no idea how to do that. And so they were a partner of my company, and they came to me one day. Literally, it's one of the coolest experiences as an entrepreneur you'll ever have, getting a phone call saying, hey, we kind of think we want to buy your company. And so we did that. I merged with their business, and Splash Media was born out of that. And we kind of took the world by storm. It was actually a very fun ride. And I was there for 3 years. And then one of the things, Pat, that I learned while I was at Splash, it's amazing, again, the things that you learn just in going through life. The company that I started was a small digital agency. And I was the CEO, but I was also the rainmaker. I knew all my clients. I was the strategist. When I moved to Splash, we grew really fast. In fact, we had 500% growth in the first year.
Wow.
And signed, over 300 clients. And we weren't a boutique agency anymore.
Yeah.
But the thing that I learned while I was there was that I loved being a boutique agency. I loved knowing who my clients were. I loved knowing what their business model was all about and how to affect positive outcomes with their business model. And so I left Splash specifically because of my hunger, really just to kind of be a boutique agency again. And so started Vende Digital really kind of officially in the beginning January of 2014, and have been serving clients ever since, and having a ball.
And what does Vende do then in that realm? Same thing you were doing at Splash, it's just your own deal, a little bit smaller?
Yeah, we're a full service digital agency. And by that, we basically work with businesses to help them attract qualified buyers, qualified customers to their website. Really kind of everything that we were doing before Splash acquired us. And that is, getting the right buyers to the website, messaging to them appropriately, getting them to take positive actions. Once they leave your site, messaging to them with email marketing or whatever the case may be. So most of our clients that hire us, Pat, hire us because they don't have those skills internally, and they just need somebody to do digital marketing for them.
Yeah.
And, our clients are what I'd call kind of mid-market, middle-sized companies. They don't want to hire a person, so they'd rather just bring an agency in to handle, that part of the business for them.
Well, there's so much, and it's changing so often. It's, it's like this was today. Now, wait a minute, by this afternoon, that's going to be different, right?
Right. Oh, yeah.
Technology's changing so much. So you wrote a couple of books, and I always like to talk to people when they've written books as authors and go, okay, so what was your biggest surprise in writing your books in this case, and what did you enjoy about it the most?
when I wrote my first book, we were at that stage. It was 2012 when it actually came out. And so the merger had happened in 2010. And just like you said, Pat, the world was changing really fast back then. Social media was becoming a real marketing platform for businesses. And it was just the right time to write a book. And so I really felt like, when I was thinking about the title Social Rules, well, we need rules in order to do this the right way. But man, if you do it the right way, social can really rule for your business, right? It
Oh, I
can
love
be
it.
a wonderful platform. So that was really exciting. I did have somebody help me write it. And I think, one of my recommendations for anybody that's going to write a book for the first time, that's really helpful. The process was really exciting because I worked with this editor. And, I've been a public speaker for a long time, and I do a lot of presentations. And so this editor, getting to know me, said, well, here's what we're going to do. We worked on what the outline of the book would be. And she said, I'm going to call you every Monday at such and such a time, and you're going to basically pitch me the chapter. So you go figure out what it is you want to say about this chapter. Go build. I literally built PowerPoint slides, Pat, that nobody saw, right? And then she'd call me on Monday morning and she'd say, okay, Paul, are you ready to go? And I'd say yes. And she'd hit the recorder and I would literally just pitch her the chapter.
Yeah.
And she recorded all of that. And, she said, hey, pretend like I am your perfect customer, just sitting across the desk and you're trying to teach me this concept. And so I would do that. And then she would record that, have those words basically digitized, and then she would edit it. And then it would come back to me and then I would tweak it. And that was the process. And it took about 6 months. And of course I was already pretty busy, Pat, so I just found that for those 6 months, instead of getting up at 6 o'clock in the morning, I would get up at 5 o'clock in the morning and get all my prep work or editing work done. But quite frankly, it's a great process. Now, the second book, Social Selling Rules, is still a work that in progress. So I'm about halfway through that book. I'm writing that myself. I had that initial experience and kind of learned the ins and outs of what it takes to write a book. And so now it's just me having a lot of fun, trying to crank out 72,000 words, which is about what it takes to get a good book out the door these days.
I love it. I love it. So let's shift gears on you. And I'd love to pick your brain on topics that I think would be really helpful for our listeners, entrepreneurs, business owners. What's the best way to lead generate right now for online? Like, what's the best way to create online leads right now in today's environment?
That's a really big question, Pat. And the reality is there are so many great ways to generate leads online. But let me kind of walk you through a process that we recommend every business kind of think through when it comes to getting qualified leads online. And it's what we call our full funnel framework. And I'm just going to kind of walk you through it at a high level. Great. But basically there's 4 pillars to the process, to the framework. The first pillar is the planning pillar. So if I want to generate leads on the internet, before you spend a dime on Facebook, before you go out and try to write blogs or get SEO traffic or whatever, you got to start with the planning phase. And the planning phase is so critical because you need to understand who is your ideal customer. And every business out there, that's going to be different. And you can't think of this as everybody is my ideal customer, right? I know you have a lot of real estate people that like to follow you, Pat, and not everybody in your target zip codes is necessarily your ideal customer. You need to think about, I like to think of it as my lowest common denominator. What is that smallest viable market that I can go and approach? Because the beauty of the web is that niches are awesome, right? Yeah. We don't have to be mass marketers anymore. And quite frankly, if you try to be a mass marketer, you're going to get diluted with everybody else out there and just look like a me too. But if you can find, that lowest common denominator, right? That smallest viable market, there's going to be something unique about that market that you can serve and really hang your shingle as, I'm the person that serves this market and solves these problems really well. Another key part of planning, Pat, is we've really got to think about, okay, now that I've got my market, it's my addressable market. Now I need to think about how can I make my market succeed? What are the problems that they're trying to solve? What are the things that they're trying to accomplish in their lives that I'm super qualified to help them accomplish, right? Because what we want to do as marketers is really turn our customers into heroes. A lot of times, this is a big challenge that I see with businesses, especially in my world, where most of my clients are B2Bs, Pat. They want to be the hero. They want to talk about how great they are, that they've been in business for 750 years, and they've got all these accolades and awards and all these certifications. Nobody cares about that at all, right? People care about, I'm here and I'm trying to get here.
Right.
And can you help me get there or not? Right. And so if we can clearly articulate, we understand, we're in this niche, right? We understand this niche. We understand the problems that people in this niche have. And I am an expert in helping people solve those problems. That is so key, because everything that you message from then on really needs to be talking about how you help people solve problems.
Right.
One of the analogies I use all the time, Pat, is nobody cares that you have aspirin until you talk about people, until you can find somebody that has a headache, right?
Exactly.
So, it's like, don't run around going, I got aspirin. You need to go around and say, hey, Pat, do you have a headache? Yeah, exactly right.
Yeah.
And so and that's why you have to figure all this out in planning, because you don't want to, start screaming from the rooftops until you've kind of figured out who is my niche market, what are the problems that I'm uniquely qualified to solve, and then how can I help them really accomplish those goals? And that's planning. And then from there, we want to move into the next pillar, which is activating your audience. And this simply just means, Pat, understanding, now that I know who my niche is, where do they hang out? Are they hanging out on Instagram? Are they hanging out on Google? Are they hanging out on LinkedIn? Everybody's market is going to be different. And certainly, everybody's on all these platforms, but you're going to find that your audience hangs out on one of those platforms more often than others. And quite frankly, you may also find that one of those platforms may be better suited for your type of service anyways. Like, for example, most of my clients are B2B. Facebook isn't necessarily a great platform for them. Sure, all of their customers are on Facebook, but that's not necessarily the best place to have a deep B2B conversation. Right. LinkedIn or Google might be a much better platform to have those types of conversations. So that's the activate your audience phase. Just go hang out where they are, and then start talking about the headaches that you can solve for them, and really kind of help them understand the problems that you can solve. At the end of the day, Pat, marketing is an exercise in memorization. Our job, we can't control when somebody's going to be ready to take action with us, but what we can control is that when they interact with us as a company and they interact with our message, that we're clear and concise in our communication, so they file away in their brain, oh, okay, that's the guy that has aspirin. When I have a headache, I'm going to talk to Pat because Pat's got aspirin. Yeah. And so that's why marketing is an exercise in memorization. When we're activating our audience, we're just kind of pounding on their head, we're the guy that's got aspirin. We're the guy that's got aspirin. When you got a headache, come talk to me. Yeah. The next step in lead generation is the next pillar, and that's really where we establish authority. And this is where your website really comes into play. So many people, Pat, think about, well, if I want to generate leads, it's all about my website. Well, yeah, it's all about your website if you do the other things that I just talked about. Your website has a very important purpose, though, and that's to establish authority. So everything that I've talked about up to this point is to get a qualified customer to your website. Now that they're there, you need to establish, man, I am really qualified to help you get to where you're trying to go. And so when you're messaging, that's really what it's all about, is saying, not only am I qualified, that's establishing authority, but you also have empathy. Man, I am qualified. I get you're trying to get to here, and I can get you there. But not only that, I really want to help you get there. I'm really interested and passionate about helping you get there. And don't be afraid to say those things, because that's what resonates with your buyer a lot. One thing, like when I send out an email, I always add in my little PS, that Vende Digital is passionate about helping as many B2B companies generate more leads and sales over the next year as possible. And that's just trying to show, hey, not only are we qualified, but we also want to. We have that empathy. We want to help you. And then the last pillar is really the pillar that's all about nurturing relationships. And it kind of goes back to the fact that, You know, we can't control when somebody's ready to say yes. We can control our message, but then, you know, when somebody opts into our environment, maybe they register for your newsletter, or they opt into your mailing list, or what, pardon me, whatever the case may be, we now need to stay top of mind by emailing them and direct mailing them and all those things that are going to kind of keep your brand and your brand promise top of mind. And I know that a lot of your real estate listeners, Pat, are probably really good at that. I mean, I feel like some of the most creative direct mail I get these days is from the real estate industry. So, you know, it's all about staying top of mind and nurturing that relationship. And if you'll follow those, I know I covered that really fast, but that's the process that you need to generate leads today. You can't really leave one of those behind.
Right.
But once you've got that figured out, go activate your audience, get the traffic to your website, and you'll generate leads.
So, Paul, I love that, by the way. And, you know, as I'm sitting here and I'm listening, and, you know, I always go back and listen to it. I mean, I can just imagine myself taking notes, because you said something which really stuck with me. And I wanted to ask you, I'm guessing, is the biggest mistake that companies make is they don't actually do pillar number one?
That is, you hit the nail on the head, Pat. They think that they've done pillar number one oftentimes, like, you know, hey, we want to do more marketing for lead generation next year, and in their mind that's planning, but the reality is that that's not planning. You've really got to kind of go through that process. You've got to establish some goals. You're never going to get somewhere unless you've got ways of measuring, you know, your progress. You know, if I'm trying to get to come from Dallas to see and visit you, Pat, up in Minneapolis, you know, and I was asking for directions, and you said, hey, just go north. That's not going to get me there, right? No. It's true, right? North is, you're north of me. But, you know, if I knew that I was trying to get to Minneapolis, you said, hey, I live in a suburb of Minneapolis. You're going to take 35, you get on 35, which is about 2 miles from my house, by the way, and just go north for 7 hours and then exit. And, you know, that's how I'm going to get there, right? So you got to have some planning that's going to give you a direction.
So let me ask you this. A lot, you know, we've got real estate agent owners who are doing $3, $4, $5, $10 million in revenue. I mean, it's no longer a business. You have a lot of people who make great livings, and then you have people who are literally running multi-million-dollar Inc. 500, you know, I mean, it's crazy what's happening in our industry. What are some email marketing tips that you could offer to people? Because I see a lot of businesses, whether it's real estate or any business, they generate what they call a lot of leads, which of course many times is, you know, email address, maybe a name, maybe a phone number, and they've got to move them through the funnel. So what advice would you give business owners that you've learned in all of your digital experience on that?
Yeah, so just a couple of things. In my mind, in the world of email marketing, there's really two critical types of emails that you need to be thinking about. One is what I call the nurture email. Okay, and this nurture email, and I'm sure your real estate customers know all about this, but that's that, you know, very periodic email that would go to just about all of your lists that you feel like are, you know, your current buyers or sellers, whatever you're trying to prospect for. And, you know, if you're using good marketing automation software, you're going to be able to personalize and customize that email based on maybe what neighborhood they live in, obviously their name and things like that. Personalization, Pat, is so important today. So, you know, anything you can do, it kind of goes back to that niche comment, right? You know, if you're sending me an email and you're talking about Stafford Estates, and that's the neighborhood I live in, you know, and that email is just customized based on the data that you have, that's going to work out a lot better than not having those things. So, you know, in our business, our clients are B2B. We recommend a nurture email once a week. You know, every single week, everybody in that list is getting an email. And I tell my clients this, and sometimes they look at me like I'm crazy. I tell them, you know what, quite honestly, if they open it, that's great. But the reality is I don't even care if they open that weekly nurture email. My number one goal is to get your name, your brand in one of the most intimate places in that person's life, which is their inbox, right? When they come to your website, that's one thing, but when you are in their inbox, that's a totally different thing. And if marketing is an exercise in memorization, we need to have your brand in their inbox every single week. The other kind of email, Pat, that you need to think about And this is another huge miss. I don't know if it's true as much in the real estate world, but it is in my world. And that is what I call the sales drip email sequence. So as soon as somebody opts into anything, maybe they've opted in to see some of your listings, or maybe they've opted in to get, your buyer's guide for that neighborhood, or whatever the case may be, you want them to go through a series of emails. Now, we recommend that's like 6 emails that they get in about a 10-day time frame. And every industry is slightly different on how frequently that should be. But we found that magic number, Pat, is really like 5 or 6. So they get an email right away. They get one maybe the next day, maybe a day or two later. But each one of those emails needs to kind of knock down whatever those objection dominoes are that you think that buyer might have as a reluctance in doing business with you. And so there's a little bit of psychology behind it. It's not just, hey, I need to send 6 emails because that's what this guy named Paul on a podcast told me, but rather there's psychology behind it. The first email is usually, all about them and their problem, and establishing, hey, I get that you have this problem and we've got aspirin, right? Then the next email we typically like is, problem solution, or big objection. What's the number one reason why people don't like to list with agents, whatever that may be in your case. And let's just get it out there and deal with it. The third one, I always like to have like a testimonial using the Phil Felt Found method. You might feel this way, and a lot of my customers felt that way, but here's what they found. That's a really great way of telling your story and telling a customer's story. And then ultimately you get to the last email, and the last email kind of goes back to that planning phase where you're just kind of laying it all out for them, that you kind of get this niche, that these are the values that you can solve or help them solve, or the values that you stand for and the problems that you can solve for them. And then just close with, hey, these are the next steps that you need to take in order to get to where you're trying to go, and with me helping you get there.
I love that. Well, there was a lot of nuggets there. You'll appreciate this when you were talking. Yesterday, I got an email from Grant Cardone, and I know you know who Grant is. And
sure.
And it caught my eye, and he's marketing for his big conference coming up. And the email started, "Hey, Pat, I've sent you 459 emails. You've opened 254 of them." And my first thought was, first of all, is that true? And then second of all, I was thinking, wow, right? I mean, wow, that somebody sends me and tells me I've not opened 200 of them.
Yeah,
and the rest of it was an offer. And I know you'd appreciate that, because it's just, that's the world we live in, right?
Right. Yeah. And I feel like, I don't know about you, Pat, but it seems like in this world that we're living in today, the email marketing side of things has just exploded. I feel like I get 10 times more emails today than I was a year ago. And so, you may think that, man, I don't want to email my list once a week. I'm telling you, if you don't, you're just invisible. You almost have to do it. And, be thoughtful about what you're sending. Another thing that would help, I think, as we're talking about this, Pat, is this concept that I call momentum. I mean, we all know what momentum is, but when you're thinking about interacting with your prospect list, one thing I always advise folks on is think about gaining momentum. Remember, they're the hero. Okay, you're the guide. Our job is to help them. Every interaction that you have with your prospect is to help them take one little tiny step in the direction towards where they're trying to go. You never want them to have a marketing interaction with you where they felt like they took a step backwards. Everything's always gaining momentum, moving them in a direction that's going to help them ultimately accomplish their goal.
Well, and something else you said, Paul, which goes back to my early days of selling real estate. I don't know that we see it a lot anymore, and yet I feel like it's coming back, is one of the things we were coached on in direct marketing was, the 7 most common mistakes that, for sale by owners make when they list their own home. And you talked about that in that sequence of emails to break that down. And so I love that. It just makes so much sense. So, oh my gosh, some amazing stuff. And I bet if we talk for 2 hours, just a wealth of information, Paul. So let me ask you this. What's the best advice you've ever been given as an entrepreneur?
Believe it or not, Pat, the best advice I ever received goes all the way back to that sales training that I mentioned at the beginning of this podcast. And I worked for a very large company. And I remember the VP of sales came out at the end of the first day of my sales training. And the first time I'd ever met him, he was kind of a rock star in our industry. And I was just a, wet behind the ears sales guy. And he looked at the audience, which was all brand new sales recruits. And he said, how many people want to make sure, guaranteed, that they will make their quota every year for the rest of their lives? And of course, we all raised our hands, right?
Sure.
And he says, I'm going to tell you 2 things you need to do to guarantee that you will make your quota for the rest of your life. And of course, I'm at the edge of my seat. I can't wait to hear what he has to say. And he said 2 very profound things that I tell everybody that I hire as well today. He said, number 1, become a problem solver and go find people that you can serve by solving problems. That's number 1. If you will solve people's problems and look for problems that you can solve, you'll never have to worry about your quota. And then number 2, hone your craft. You are a professional, just like a jeweler or any other profession that's out there. And it's up to you to hone your craft, to get better. You want the next year version of you to be better than this year version of you. So always hone your craft. And, I've been in this business now, as a professional, Pat, for 30 years, if you think about starting in 1990. And I have been a student my entire life of whatever's out there. And I cannot impress upon your audience enough. And I'm sure they wouldn't be listening to a great podcast like this, Pat, if they didn't believe that. So, just take that as an affirmation, hone your craft. I can tell you it has done me so much good over my career. And there's so much information out there, but those are the 2 biggest pieces of advice. And I'm so grateful that I got them very early on in my career.
Yeah. Well, Paul, I love that you said that, because you actually are, when before we started today, and I was doing all my research, and I said this to you before we started, I know you from somewhere. Like, where do I know you from? And we found out it was from Splash Media. And that was just because of the repetitiveness, right? And so
Sure.
It's what you're teaching us and what you're delivering, you live it. It clearly is the case. Let's flip it upside down. What's the absolute worst advice you've ever been given? Maybe you bought into it, maybe you didn't. What's the worst advice you've ever been given?
Pat, I was thinking about that question because I've heard you ask people that question before. And, I've got some advice I wanted to share that's negative advice. I don't think it ever came from a person. I really feel like it's maybe something we hear from our culture, and that's busyness, right? That
Right.
There's some value in being really, really busy. And I don't know where that comes from. I definitely have fallen into that before where, man, I'd give anything to go back to some of the early years when my kids were younger, and I felt like busyness was more important than maybe the things that I should have been doing with my kids. And so, at the end of the day, we all have 24 hours, right? We get up, we have a 24-hour period. That makes us all on the exact same playing field. So we all have to be curators of our time. If we don't curate our time and decide what we're going to place in those moments and what's important to us, somebody else will. And so my encouragement or the bad advice here is let's not wear busyness as a badge of honor, but let's take a step back and think about our lives and curate the best life for us right now, which is a well-balanced life.
Yeah, absolutely. So with that, before we kind of wind up here, what has your experience been both as a business owner, entrepreneur, interacting with other companies around the pandemic, and what do you see moving forward?
I'm so tired of hearing the term new normal, Pat, but I think we all know that the world that we're going to move into will not be the world that we left prior to March, right? It's going to be something different. I think we're seeing that some light at the end of the tunnel, but here's the thing: the articles and the stories that I've read show that digital transformation took a 2-year leap forward as a result of this pandemic. And so things like Zoom meetings, things like having and moving customers through a buying process without maybe necessarily ever meeting them face to face. Those are things that I think are going to stay here. And so there's good news and bad news to that. I think the good news is that our buyers have now gotten used to this digital transformation world. And so that's could be a very good thing in how you reach customers. And I'll give you a quick story on that, Pat. The way that we market our business primarily prior to this pandemic was in lunch and learns. And so we would host a lunch and learn. We'd have 30 or 40 businesses come in at a time. I would give a presentation, we'd buy them lunch, and a certain number of clients would come out of that. And it's been it's a way we've been marketing our business for a long time. Well, the pandemic happened, and all of a sudden I had to cancel our 10 lunch and learns we had planned for 2020. I was kind of freaked out, Pat, to be honest with you. It's like, what am I going to do back in March?
Right.
But then in August, we decided, let's take our lunch and learn digital. And so we hosted our first virtual lunch and learn in August. And you know what, Pat? Instead of having 30 businesses there, we had 200 businesses there, right? And so while we don't have the face-to-face that I love, we're now able to be in multiple cities at one time, where having a physical lunch and learn, we were confined to one location. So, the world is going to be different, but what we as entrepreneurs have to do are find those diamonds in the rough. There's going to be a lot of people out there that are just trying to figure out how to survive. In my mind, this is the time to find the diamonds in the rough and really take it to the next level.
Well, and it's a great time you have to raise your skills as well. You mentioned that a little bit earlier.
Absolutely.
So Paul, as we kind of wind up, I'm going to ask you for your final thought. Is there any book that you'd recommend that you're reading or you've recently read to our listeners?
Besides
your own.
Yeah. There are a lot of books that are out there, and I'm trying to think of one that I've read recently. Now, Russell Brunson, you probably heard of him. I'm reading his Traffic Secrets book right now. I find it super, super fascinating. I would say, just go out there and look on Amazon for the different books that are available to you, and look for the reviews that are out there. Probably the best book I've ever read business-wise, though, was 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey, which is probably 35 years old now. But man, I literally just bought that book this week for one of our team members because, you follow those habits, it'll change your life.
Yeah, it doesn't go out of style. Well, Paul, you have shared so much. Thank you so much. We really appreciate it. Any final thoughts you would give to our listeners before we wrap it up?
Just last thought. I know I tend to be a fire hose. Sorry about that. But
no, you did a great job.
Yeah, here's the key. We're in a new era. New eras create new opportunities. The world of digital is stronger and more entrenched now than ever before. Go figure out who your buyer is. Go find that niche that you can serve super well and understand the problems that you can solve in that niche. And then just repeat it until you think people are sick of you talking about the problems that you solve. And I think you'll be amazed at the impact that can have on your business.
That's great advice, Paul. Well, Paul, you know what? Again, thanks so much. You shared some amazing information today. I know when I go back and listen, I'm going to have pages of notes, and I trust our listeners will as well. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for supporting the Success Ascent. Subscribe at your favorite podcast stores, or go to www.thesuccessascent, and you can sign up there as well. Thanks again, Paul. We really appreciate having you.
Yeah, appreciate it, Pat. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, my pleasure. My pleasure. As I end every show, everybody, thanks so much for being here. Be safe, be happy, and have an awesome day. Take care, everybody. If you've not yet subscribed, please go to your favorite podcast source and subscribe to the Success Ascent, or simply go to www.thesuccessascent, and that's ASCENT.com, thesuccessascent.com. Thanks so much for joining us today. We look forward to catching you on the next Ascent.